Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cristina, and this is my colleague Shan Gay, and we are both associate lecturers of English in the School of Policy Studies at Kwansei Gakuin University. So today we're going to tell you about an extensive reading program. Actually, we will tell you about the students' perception of their progress with extensive reading within this program. So I would like to tell you a few words about the EAP program in which this extensive reading program was implemented. This took place at a newly established faculty department at a small university in Western Japan. So this faculty department offers 3 fields of study for the students to specialize in. These are management, education, and tourism and hospitality. So most of the courses are offered in English, with a few Japanese-English hybrid courses. For the first 3 semesters of study, all students are required to take part in an intensive EAP program. And upon successful completion of these 3 semesters of EAP, all students are required to go for study abroad. So for study abroad, the students are encouraged to take part in bridging courses or regular classes with native speakers. Although for lower level students, traditional EFL prep courses are also accepted. Once the students come back to Japan, they can start taking specialty courses within their majors, within their fields of study. And at that point, these courses are offered mostly in English. The extensive reading program about which we will talk about takes place in the freshman year within the first 2 semesters of EAP. So going on to the next slide. As you probably all know, extensive reading has been established as a very good tool for students to make progress with English. There are several studies in the literature that document gains in vocabulary acquisition, writing skills, grammar, tests, usually the TOEFL test, and as well as reading competency overall is improved. Some researchers claim that extensive reading practice is superior to intensive reading practice in the classroom, and that students make more progress with extensive reading courses. And also for university students who have failed courses and are repeating, extensive reading has been shown to have a significant positive effect on motivation. In 2015, Nobuko Sakura at Kyoto Zangyo University conducted a study in which he showed that students who read on average 70,000 or more words are less likely to engage in English to Japanese translation during extensive reading. So why is this important? Because for Japanese students in junior high school and high school, reading in English is taught as a translation exercise. So when students are presented with a text in English, they're asked to look at the text sentence by sentence. So when they look at a sentence, the first thing they have to do is to locate the subject, verb, and object, translate these words into Japanese. Then they analyze the other words in the sentence, their grammatical function, translate these words into Japanese, and recreate the sentence in Japanese. And they do this sentence by sentence by sentence. And this process is very cumbersome and is very contradictory to what extensive reading is supposed to be. So extensive reading is supposed to be a smooth flowing process. The students are supposed to read a lot of easy books that are at or slightly below their level. They're not supposed to use a dictionary. They're not supposed to be translating. So we wanted to check for this study, how much do students actually read and how much do they translate as they were taught in K through 12 education. So let's talk about the extensive reading program at this university. So we decided to use xreading.com because it was very user-friendly. Students could do reading on their mobile phones, on their way to school. It was also very user-friendly for the instructors. We could easily keep track of the words read, speed, the books and level of the books, and test their comprehension with quizzes. X-reading also has a very wide variety of books in many different genres. So we decided that to receive a score of 60% or a passing score, students should read about 15,000 words per week with an overall quiz average of 50%. Also during the summer, we had a summer reading campaign of 8,000 words per week. In the first semester, the reading course consisted mostly of extensive reading. So we would teach them how to use X-reading, how to choose books, and we would have different activities where students would share the books that they enjoyed or give summaries and presentations about the books. And also we were teaching them vocabulary acquisition skills. In the second semester, the reading course consisted of an extensive reading and intensive reading blend. So this extensive reading course was mostly for 1 year. In the second year, we would ask the students to continue reading, but not on X-reading. We would ask them to select graded readers from the library. And we didn't track their reading progress. So the purpose of the survey that we're going to talk about was to overall evaluate the AP program and this extensive reading program in particular. So this survey had two goals. One was to gauge the students' perception about their level of English to Japanese translation during extensive reading. And the second goal was to determine if the audio function in X-reading helped the students to avoid English to Japanese translation. So X-reading has an audio function. Students can listen to the stories while reading. The survey was adapted from Nobuko Sakurai's 2015 study. And we conducted it in the second week, in the second semester in week 20. So there were 11 survey questions with 1 to 6 answers based on a Likert scale. These questions were translated into Japanese. And the students, even in English, they should be aware with a lot of the terms from the questions, like most frequently used words. So these are not new concepts for the students. And from now, my colleague Sean Gay is going to talk about the data analysis and results of our survey.
All right, so let's start off with the main portion of the survey, which was in relation to translation. So this consisted of 5 questions. The first question is whether overall they used less Japanese. And the second question was about sentence level translation, whether they translated word order to help them better understand the sentences. And then the next 3 questions were related to word frequency and word level translation. So I compiled these results, and the overall mean scores for overall translation and words that they weren't familiar with, that level of translation was around 4.3. So somewhere in between the somewhat agree and the agree, whereas sentence level translation and translation of frequently used words went up to 4.65 and 4.69 respectively, and words that they were familiar with were in the agree area at 4.99. There wasn't that high of a standard deviation. It's within 1 point, so that means there's most of the answers are close to the mean. As for the kurtosis and skewness, I think it's better to look at the graph. And here you can see the red represents overall translation. And you see how that skews a little closer to the center, but it's still largely in the agree sector. So overall, there was a reduction in translation. In terms of sentence level translation, as well as frequently used word translation, that's the yellow and the light blue respectively, you can see how it curves further to the right. And for the words that they were more familiar with, the purple bar, it skews even further to the right. So we're seeing a lot of students using less translation after doing extensive reading. Furthermore, the more familiar the words become, the less likely they are to use translation. And extensive reading is good at increasing familiarity through actual usage. Overall, the overall translation and single word translation are fairly closely associated with each other. And so when we're looking at their perception of their overall translation usage, it's very closely related to their single word translation. So it looks like single word translation is the primary type of translation students were using at the beginning and probably throughout. Sentence level translation and frequently used word translation is a little bit less common, but again, both of these decrease over time, and there's an overall skew towards a reduction in translation among all the categories. Now, vocalization, saying the words, speaking as you're reading, this one has a double peak, somewhat disagree and agree, which suggests that this is a slightly more complicated question. And it does overall skew towards a reduction in vocalization. However, because there are two peaks, there are several interpretations that could be applied. One is that vocalization is found to be useful among some students, and those students would likely disagree, which is why you'd see the peak at the somewhat disagree. However, for the students that don't perceive it as useful, they may perceive it as a crutch, and this is a larger group, the group that skews towards the agree. This could be because there's a mix of levels, TOEFL level 150 to 750 among the students, which means that you're not going to have a uniform sample of perception with something like vocalization while reading. The next two questions, 7 and 8, are about avoiding disfluency. So basically, are they pausing less as they practice their extensive reading and trying to continue reading rather than stopping to look up words or stopping to understand grammar? And in both categories, you see it skewed towards the agree side of the chart, with the words being somewhat less prominent in the skewing. And so there's an overall skew towards avoidance of pauses. It's somewhat more centralized than the translation question, which means that we're seeing a weaker effect than translation on the fluency or the avoiding of disfluency. Grammar is somewhat similar to translation in that we see it skewing towards the agree portion. However, again, it's somewhat more centralized. And so there's a reduction in grammar focus as they read more. So the students are moving from reading to practice language to reading to enjoy reading, is what it appears to signal in this survey. And however, this is a weaker effect than translation. It's somewhat centralized again, so some students are focusing on grammar still. Audio function use. Now, this is an interesting graph in that it seems fairly random in terms of distribution. So that means that many students didn't use the audio function more, and many students use the audio function more. And there's it's somewhat skewed towards not using. The reason may be that there was a lack of consistent messaging. In addition, some students may perceive it as cheating. So they're supposed to be reading, but by listening, they're saying, oh, I'm not actually doing the reading, I'm just listening, and so I'm kind of cheating. And so some students may avoid it because they feel like it's cheating. Also, some teachers may not have informed the students properly about the functionality or the benefits of listening while reading. There's a general lack of agreement on the usage of the audio function among students. However, this may be less about the students and more about the messaging, as this is a new program, and so the messaging consistency may have been an overall issue.
Yes, and also, sorry, Sean, also weaker students felt that the audio function for some books was forcing them to read more quickly than they were comfortable with. And some students in the higher level classes felt that the audio function was actually slowing them down. Sorry, I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's okay. So yeah, if a book has an audio function, it would be ideal for some sort of speed control to help improve the accessibility of the listening function to a broader range of students. Now, the audio function effect on translation is a little bit less random in that it skews towards those that felt the audio function helped them decrease their use of translation. What's interesting here is, yes, there's a slight skew towards reduction in translation. The lack of clumping or the lack of skewness may be related to inconsistent usage. And this question may need to be revisited because there wasn't a broad agreement on the validity of the audio function among students. However, there is a Pearson correlation between question 10 and 11, which means students that used the audio function more felt they decreased their use of translation more. So there appears to be a function related to students that actually use the audio, feeling that it helped them, whereas students that didn't use the audio function perhaps didn't answer this question because in a way that was honest, because they hadn't actually used the function, so they couldn't really tell how it affected their use of translation. Now, overall, we see a reduction in translation. We see a reduction in grammar focus, and we see the need for more research on vocalization and audio because there needs to be clearer messaging among the teachers to make sure that students understand the values and the usage of the vocalization and audio. Do you have anything to add, Cristina?
No, that's it. I think I interrupted you and rudely and added it in the middle of your presentation. But thank you so much for coming to our presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.